Hey, what's up everybody? Tommy here, and welcome to the final episode of the SQL Fundamentals series. I may end up continuing this in the future with more advanced topics, but for now nothing's certain, so as far as we know, this will be the final episode. After covering the fundamentals today, I'll go over a lot of helpful resources that you can use to get even better at SQL, and from there you can continue your SQL journey. So without further ado, let's get right into the tutorial. So the first thing I'll be showing you today is the count function. Basically what it does is returns the amount of rows with the specified criteria. So to start off with a basic example, let's say we want to return the amount of rows in the customers table overall. So what we can do is say select and then count, then in parentheses an asterisk like that. That means the total amount of rows, and then just from the name of the table, which is customers. And then when we run the code, it'll return 122 because there are 122 rows in the customers table. Now to build onto this, let's say we only want to count the amount of distinct countries represented by the entries in the customers table. So what we can do is in the parentheses, instead of putting an asterisk, just put distinct, which is just a keyword that literally means that all the countries must be distinct, and the name of the column, which is just country. So we run it, and you'll notice that it'll actually return 27, which is the amount of distinct countries. Now you might remember from my last tutorial that I said I would go over in my next tutorial how to deal with default values so that you're able to insert new rows into a table. So to demonstrate this, I'm using the product lines table, which is also part of the classic model state database. Now let's say for whatever reason I wanted to add an entry to the product lines table, but I didn't want to have to specify what goes into the product line column. To do this, I would only specify the names of the other columns. So what I would do is type in the words insert into, and then the name of the table, which is product lines. Then in parentheses the columns that we're going to insert values into, so text description, HTML description, and image, and then the word values, and then in parentheses the values that we will insert. So just for the sake of example, as text description, I'll just put in the word description in quotes because it's a string of characters, and then I'll just put null for the other two. Now more likely than not, when you run this code, you'll end up getting an error message at the bottom. So there are a lot of different error messages that could come up in a situation like this, but what tends to be a solution to this a lot of times is just changing the default value of one or some of the columns in the table. So in this example, we'll be changing the default value of the product line column. So to do that, what we do is taking the words alter table and then the name of the table, which is product lines, and then the word alter once again, and then the name of the column that we're altering, which is just product line. Then the words set default, and then in quotes what our default value is going to be. So let's say for whatever reason we wanted it to be the number 45. Not saying that this is got like a real life scenario, but just for the sake of example, we'll finish this off with a semicolon, and then when you run this code, you should get something at the bottom saying that it was successful. So now that you've changed the default value, you can run that program from before once again, and it should work. Now if you want to see the new entry in your table, you'll just select everything from the product lines table. And then you'll notice somewhere in the table there will be a row with the product line being the number 45. Next I'll be showing you the union operator. Basically what it does is combines data from two different tables into one table. Now when we use the union operator, we have to make sure that the columns from each of the tables we're using the union operator on are similar in type. So what I'll do for this example is select the customers table and the employees table, and basically both of them have a customer number column. So what I'm going to do is return each customer's and employee's customer number as well as the corresponding name for each number. So I'll just start out by selecting both of the tables. And so for the first table, the customers one, we'll type the names of the columns that we want to return. So we'll do select customer number, contact first name, from customers, which is the name of the first table, of course, and then we'll type in the word union, and then do the same thing with the second table. So we'll go to the employees table here, and we're doing select employee number as well as first name from employees, and we'll finish it off with a semicolon, then run it, and you'll notice it'll return every single employee's and customer's first name and their corresponding numbers. However, the one thing we should take note of is that at the top here, the labels are customer number and contact first name, even though there are employees in this column too. So this would be a good example of where we should rename something. So instead of customer number, we can just call it person number, like that. And instead of contact first name, we could just call it first name. When we run it, the headings at the top will change. Something else to take note of is that by default, the union operator only returns distinct values. So let's say you have two different rows that for some reason have the same entries, and you want to return both of them. For that, the only difference would be instead of using the word union, you would just use the phrase union all, like that. Okay, so the next thing I'll be showing you is the group by statement. Basically what it does is takes the entries from the table and puts them into like a certain group based on certain criteria. So for the sake of example, let's say we want to select the amount of rows, which will also be equivalent to the amount of people from the customers table. And since this is equivalent to the amount of people, we could just put as people. And then let's say we want to also select the cities that the amounts of people correspond to. So we'll just select the city column as well. And then here after we type in the table name, we would type in group by. And then since city is what we're grouping it by, we'll just type in city. And then when we run this, you'll notice that it'll return each city as well as the amount of people in each city. Now let's say we wanted to order this based on how many people were in each city. All we would do is type in order by and then people, because that's what we renamed the count to. Sorry, no, we would have to do descending as well, because we wanted to start with the highest. And yeah, you'll notice that it'll first return the cities with 5 people, then 3, and so on. Okay, so something else that I should mention in regards to group by is the having clause. Basically, it's used to filter records when you can't use where. Because basically, whenever you use group by, you're not able to filter records using the where keyword, so you have to use having instead. So let's say, for example, we only wanted to return the cities and the amount of people that each city has, where the city has to have more than one person. So all we would do is, instead of typing where, after the city, we would type in having, and then count of the amount of people is greater than 1. And then when you run it, you'll notice it'll only return cities with more than one person. Next, I'll be showing you the exist operator. Basically, it's used to test whether or not there exists a row, like meeting certain specified criteria in a table. So basically, the operator will return true if there is a row that meets a certain criteria, while it'll return false if there are not any rows meeting the criteria. So to use this, to start out, we would just type in select like always, and then the name of the column that we want to return like always. And from the name of the table, and then we type in where exist, and then in parentheses the criteria that we want to specify to determine whether true or false is returned. So let's say for whatever reason we wanted to see if there was a city that had a person with a customer number greater than 485. Basically, in the parentheses we would put a separate subquery for this. So we could do select distinct city where customer number is greater than 485. Then when we run this, you'll notice that values are returned, which means that this is true instead of false. Okay, so next I'll be showing you the any operator. Is pretty similar to where exists. Basically, if any of the values in the table meet a certain criteria, then it'll return true, while if none of them do, it'll return false. So for example, let's say for whatever reason we wanted to see if there existed any entry where the sales rep employee number in the customers table is greater than 1600. Basically, to do this, you would start out by saying select from, of course, and then the name of the table. and then where, and then the name of one of the columns. Let's just use customer number for example, and then equals the word any, and then in parentheses we're gonna do a separate subquery now. So we'll say select, and then the same column that we put right here. So customer number from customers, the name of the table, and then since we want the sales rep employee number to be greater than 16, we'll just say where sales rep employee number is greater than 1600. And then when we run this, you'll notice values will be returned, which means that this is true instead of false. Now, very similar to the any operator, there's also the all operator, which basically just returns true if all of the records in the subquery meet the criteria, while it returns false if there are any that don't meet the criteria. So for example, if we put all instead of any just by replacing the word, you'll notice that nothing will be returned because there are rows that do not meet the criteria. Next, I'll be showing you the case statement. Basically what it does is it cycles through certain conditions, and basically if it meets one condition, returns one value, while if it meets another condition, returns another value. So for example, let's say we wanted the word good to be returned if the credit limit was greater than 90,000, while we wanted the word bad to be returned if it was less than 90,000. So what we can do is say select, and then the names of the columns that we want to return. I'll just do an asterisk to do all the columns, and then separated by a comma we would put the word case. And then this works kind of like an if then and else type of thing. Basically we put when, and then our conditions, so credit limit greater than 90,000. After that we put the word then, and then good, because that's what we wanted to return if it's greater than 90,000. Now let's say we wanted it to return neither if it was equal to 90,000. What we could do is type another when, and then this time credit limit equals 90,000, then neither. And then lastly we would type the word else, and basically this means that if it doesn't meet the above conditions, it'll cover everything else. So we could just say it'll return bad. And then once you're done with the whole case thing, you would just type in the word end. And then lastly, you would just type in from, and then the name of the table you're doing this all from, so obviously customers. And then when you run it, you'll notice in addition to all the columns, it'll return like good or bad depending on what the credit limit is. Next, I'll be showing you the if null function. Basically what it does is returns one thing if a value is not null, and returns another thing if the value is null. So to show how it works with an example, first we just type in select, and then the name of the column we want to return and apply the if null function to. So for example, let's apply it to customer number. And let's say for whatever reason we wanted to multiply it by the sales rep employee number, but if it was null, set the sales rep employee number to 0. So what we can do is use the symbol to multiply, and then the words if null, like that, and then in parentheses we'll put the value we would normally multiply it by. So in this case it's sales rep employee number, and then if that sales rep employee number is null, we can have it as a 0 instead. And then of course we just type in from customers, the name of the table. And when you run it at first, it might be a little confusing because everything's a 0, but if you scroll down, you'll notice that it'll return a lot of numbers down at the bottom. Next, I'll be showing you stored procedures in SQL. Stored procedures are basically shortcuts that you can type to perform an action that you have saved that you don't want to completely type out again. So to show an example, I'm going to create a procedure as an alternative to typing in select asterisk from customers, like for when we're selecting the whole customers table. So to create a stored procedure, you'll go to the left over here and you'll right click on where it says stored procedures, and then you'll click create stored procedure. You can name it whatever you want. So for example, let's just call this example procedure, like that. And then between begin and end, whatever the procedure is supposed to do. So in this case, select the customers table. And then you'll just click apply, and then apply, and then finish. And then you'll go back over here, and you'll type in the word call, and then the name of the procedure, which in this case is example procedure. And then when you run it, you'll notice it'll actually return what we had typed originally. So that covers pretty much everything I wanted to go over. So now I'll just quickly discuss some resources that you can use to furthermore improve your SQL skills. And I'll leave a link to all of these resources in the description of this video. So first of all, mysqltutorial.org allows you to become much more familiar with the SQL language and just how MySQL works overall. Additionally, there's a website called hackerrank.com, which has a lot of practice problems that you can use to challenge yourself with your SQL skills. There's also projecteuler.net, which has more coding problems for various languages. And lastly, of course, there are many tutorials out there on youtube.com, so just search for what you need on YouTube and you can probably find what you're looking for. Besides that, that's about it. Thank you so much for sticking with me for the entire series. Now please take a minute to fill out the SurveyMonkey down below in the description. That would really help me a lot. But besides that, that's about it. So yeah, again, thank you so much for watching, and see you in my next video.